Hello, it's delighting to see you again in the weekend edition of Into Vietnam, which summarizes the most outstanding macroeconomic events in the past week, following our major stories. Moody's maintained negative outlook for Vietnam's banking system and expect the bad debt ratio at 15%. The number of commercial banks may be reduced by half. Vietnam-Australian economic and trade tie will be in the focus in today's program with the participation of the Australian ambassador to Vietnam, Mr. Hugh Borrowman. Let's begin with this week's figures. In its global survey report on consumer confidence, Nelson said the consumer confidence index of Vietnam reached 98 points in the fourth quarter of 2013, the highest in 2 years and over 10 points compared to the same period of the previous year. However, since 2011, the index has never exceeded 100 points. Compared to the world average of 94, that of Vietnam is higher, but it is lower than the average of Southeast Asia. Nelson's report also showed Vietnam is the most economical country in Southeast Asia. 74% of the Vietnamese who participated in the survey say they would save money after they have converted essential living expenses. About 90% of Vietnamese says they change their shopping habits to save more money. In particular, spending on new clothes and entertainment outside the home are the first choices of cut, followed by gas and electricity. Moody's maintaining its negative outlook on the Vietnamese banking system, although it recognized recent signs of stabilization on the macroeconomic front and regulatory measures that could bring benefits in the next 2 to 3 years. Moody's does not expect a significant broad-based improvement in the capitalization of Vietnamese bank in the next 12 to 18 months. Moody's estimates problem assets in the system to comprise at least 15% of the total assets, significantly above the 4.7% non-performing loan ratio reported by the State Bank of Vietnam in October 2013. Therefore, the agency puts strong emphasis on the government's greater efforts to improve banks' liquidity. By January the 31st, commercial banks has disbursed more than 1 trillion dong from the 30 trillion dong housing supporting package to 2,218 customers. The State Bank of Vietnam say in the statement that the disbursed loans increased by 32.7% from the figure of last December. Earlier, the banks committed to offer loans to more than 2,200 individuals with total capital of 801.6 billion dong, or $37.99 million, of which 533.7 billion dong, or $25.3 million, were disbursed to 2,208 borrowers. The Bank for Investment and Development of Vietnam reached the highest disbursement of 192.4 billion dong, or $9.11 million, followed by Vietnam Joint Stock Commercial Bank for Industry and Trade with 153.4 billion dong, or $7.27 million. The lowest disbursement was seen in the Mekong Housing Bank with 7.7 billion dong. Coming up next is some major macroeconomic and investment news. There are currently over 30 domestic commercial banks in Vietnam, and the State Bank Governor has just confirmed that the figure is planned to be halved. Answering the question about whether or not they plan to reduce the number of domestic commercial banks, including foreign banks, development banks, and policy banks, to 14 to 17 in the next 3 years, the State Bank Governor Nguyễn Văn Bình said, currently there are over 30 domestic commercial banks in Vietnam, according to the calculations. The number of 14 to 17 banks is appropriate with the scale of Vietnam's economy. However, the plan is a destined goal and can't be done overnight. The Finance and Banking Department under the Ministry of Finance forecasts there will be 30 to 35 trillion dong corporate bonds issued to the market in 2014. However, the actual figure will depend on capital needs of businesses and their ability to raise capital through other channels, including shares and bank credit. The Finance and Banking Department says, based on macroeconomic balance, it's expected that there will be 210 trillion dong government bonds, 51 trillion dong government-backed bonds, and 10 to 12 trillion dong municipal bonds to be issued in the year. Commenting on corporate bond markets, leader of the department says the positive sign is this channel begins to grow again. However, the downside is there are almost no transaction for corporate bonds, and if any, there is no published information to the basis for the market valuation. At the recent conference, Deputy State Auditor General Lê Minh Khai said in 2014, the state audit of Vietnam will focus on auditing economic restructuring activities and the efficiency of public investment and asset. The SAV planned to audit 185 units across the country this year, over 20% higher than the number of last year. The SAV will look at the management and use of state budget and public assets at some ministry and the State Bank of Vietnam. Among 42 state-owned corporations to be audited this year, insurance and finance institutions are the SAV primary targets.
Quy mô của một số cái tập đoàn, cái tổng ty thì năm ngoái thì làm những cái tập đoàn tương đối lớn, năm nay thì đi sâu vào cái lĩnh vực bảo hiểm. Đấy. Rồi những cái tổng công ty chẳng hạn như là SCAC, công ty mua bán nợ, đi sâu vào cái lĩnh vực tài chính và tiền tệ để đánh giá cái hiệu quả hoạt động cũng như là cái việc mà quản lý và sử dụng vốn. Bởi vì cái ảnh hưởng tới cái nền kinh tế thì như các ông chỉ biết là nó có hai chính sách rất lớn, một là tài phá, hai là tiền tệ.
Major state-owned enterprises are on the hot list, include those operating in chemicals, cement, medicine, railway, steel, and paper. Statistics from the State Bank of Vietnam showed by the end of 2013, the bad debt ratio of the banking system was only 3.79%. This is the lowest ratio in the past 2 years, since February 2012 at 3.66%. Also, according to the data from the central bank, after 2 years of consecutive rise and maintaining at over 4%, even up to nearly 5% in September 2012, for the first time, the bad debts recorded such a sharp fall, and it dropped to below 4%. In 2013, the highest bad debt ratio was recorded at 4.73% in October, which means that the bad debt ratio may fall nearly 1 percentage point just after several months. If the above fall continues to maintain, the bad debt ratio would soon fall to below 3%, the acceptable threshold according to the Vietnam auditing standards. The United States Department of Commerce, or DOC, on February the 19th, issued a preliminary decision concluding that Vietnam has dumped steel light pumps used for transporting gas and oil in the U.S. market. The DOC decision, which subjects Vietnam export to anti-dumping duties, comes on the heels of complaints lodged by U.S. Steel Corporation against Vietnam and 8 other countries and territories. The rate imposed on Vietnam is the highest anti-dumping rate levied on any of the 9 nations and territories. In accordance with the ruling, a special tax rate of 9.57% will be imposed on Vietnam's steel exports to the U.S. Vietnam ranked 3rd among nations exporting steel light pumps to the U.S., with a turnover reaching over $110 million in 2013, just after the Republic of Korea and India. After the Lunar New Year, deposits at banks have sharply risen when credit growth was negative at 0.5% in January 2014 compared to December 2013, creating headache for banks. With excessive money, banks have to buy government bonds despite low interest rates. Director of the Joint Stock Bank says, with deposit interest rate of 7% per year, plus required reserves, buying bonds is not profitable. However, they still have to invest rather have money sitting idle. Besides, after the Lunar New Year, the State Bank of Vietnam has strongly withdrew money through open market operations. As part of a tour to some Southeast Asian countries, the Australian Foreign Minister Julie Bishop on February the 18th held talks with the Vietnam Prime Minister Nguyễn Tấn Dũng and her counterpart Phạm Bình Minh with the aim of strengthening economic ties between the two countries. Vietnamese Foreign Minister Phạm Bình Minh welcomed Ms. Bishop to the country before holding meetings that focus on boosting cooperation in trade and investment, regional security and cooperation in education. Later in the afternoon, Ms. Bishop met with Prime Minister Nguyễn Tấn Dũng for discussion on further economic ties between the two nations. Between 2009 and 2013, Vietnam and Australia saw a leap in their economic and trade tie, with import-export turnover rising from 3.3 billion Australian dollar in 2009 to 6 billion Australian dollars in 2013. The Australian government also granted ODA for Vietnam from $105.9 million to $160 million during the period. On the occasion of Ms. Julie Bishop's visit to Vietnam, VITV reporter had a talk with the Australian ambassador to Vietnam, Mr. Hugh Borrowman. He affirms the foreign minister visit is expected to boost Vietnam-Australia relations in various fields, especially in economic and trade ties, as both nations are stepping up to conclude the TPP. Good morning, Mr. Hugh Borrowman. Thank you so much for joining our interview today on the VITV channel. Trade and economic tie has been one of the main pillars for Vietnam and Australia cooperation in the past years. What do you think we should boost cooperation in new areas to increase the trade values between the two countries in coming years?
The thing about trade is, of course, it depends on markets. Australia and Vietnam are lucky because we have complementary economies. There aren't areas in which we compete with each other in other markets. I think governments have done and are doing nearly all the things that governments can do. So we're both in the WTO, we're both in the Australia, ASEAN, New Zealand Free Trade Agreement, we'll both be in the TPP. The things governments can do are reduce the barriers to trade and to provide the right regulatory environment. It's then up to business to step in and actually generate the trade.
Australia has supported Vietnam in global economic integration, especially in joining the World Trade Organization in 2007. And the two countries are participating in the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement negotiations. What do you think are the chances for stronger commitments from the both sides as the TPP is going to a close?
Well, you're quite right that Australia has consistently supported Vietnam's ambitions to integrate itself into the global economy, and we think that's a very important policy aim on behalf of Vietnam because it's through those kind of measures that Vietnam has made the great economic progress that it has. The TPP is important because it's the next stage of regional and global trade integration. Now, of course, the negotiations are still underway, so we don't know what the shape of the deal will be. What we do want to see is a strong, modern trade agreement. From Australia's perspective, we want strong market access for Vietnam. I think the bigger importance of the TPP, though, is the size and the conceptual aspects, that it's going to be the most modern trade agreement in the world. And Vietnam particularly stands to, as you know, benefit very strongly from its access from a good deal with the United States.
On February the 18th, the Australian Foreign Minister paid official visit to Vietnam. After the working session with top Vietnamese officials, she announced 3 important packages to support Vietnam restructure its economy as well as improve women powers. Can you tell in details about the packages?
This was the first visit by the Australian Foreign Minister from our new government was elected in September last year. So within the first 5 months, the Australian Foreign Minister has visited here. The Parliamentary Secretary for Aid also visited to start the construction of the Khao Lang Bridge. Our Prime Ministers have met in the margins of APEC. The fact that in the first 5 months of the new Australian government all our top leaders have met indicates the strength that the importance that Australia places on our relationship with Vietnam. One of the strong things we've done throughout our relationship is to help Vietnam achieve its own development goals, and the packages that you mentioned go towards that. One of the packages was called Restructuring for a More Competitive Vietnam. This is a program to help Vietnamese officials along the lines that I described before, to train them in the kind of economic disciplines and the kind of processes that will support Vietnam's own path of economic reformation. The other two, one is a project that is designed to assist women in northwest Vietnam get their goods to market. We had an earlier phase of the program which focused on crop selection and development and helped them to grow better crops. This phase of the project helps them to get those goods to market, and that obviously enables them to increase their incomes. And as you know, that's one of the poorer parts of Vietnam. The other project was about $2.1 million, as with the vegetable project, working through the Women's Union to help address the question of domestic violence in Vietnam. Now, domestic violence occurs everywhere. It occurs in Australia, it occurs in Vietnam. It's not a problem of one particular country, but it's unacceptable wherever it happens. It's unacceptable for social reasons, but it's also an economic cost. Estimates show that approximately 1.8% of Vietnam's GDP is lost due to domestic violence. Families that suffer domestic violence have lower incomes, they have lower outcomes in terms of their life experience. So it's very important for a whole variety of reasons that we combat domestic violence, and the monies that we've given to the Women's Union will help achieve that.
Last year, Vietnam and Australia celebrated their 40th anniversary of diplomatic tie. And early this year, the foreign minister visited Vietnam. Can we consider these as the positive sign that Vietnam and Australia can raise their relationship to a new height of strategic partnership?
I think in any meaningful sense of the word, our relationship is already strategic. But if you look at the contents of that document, it covers education, it covers development assistance, it covers defence, it covers political cooperation, it covers police training. I think in any sense of the word that's strategic. So our strong sense is we should focus on the content of the relationship and not worry too much about the words. And certainly the ministers agreed as a result of the visit to deepen and strengthen that cooperation in the future.
And once again, thank you so much for your informative sharing today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
And now for In Trade News, we continue the program.
Germany is Vietnam's largest trade partner in the EU, accounting for 20% of the country's total trade turnover from the bloc. Last year, Vietnam's export to Germany reached $4.72 billion, a year-on-year increase of 15.4%. Among the exports, mobile handsets and components were at the top of the list, with earnings tracking $1.54 billion, which represented an annual increase of 32% and constituted one-third of the total export value. Other export items included footwear, garments, coffee and timber products, seafood, handicrafts, computers and electronics were also among the basket of goods exported. In the first month of this year, Vietnam exported $462 million worth of goods to the market, higher than in last December. According to the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development, fruit and vegetable exports are expected to enjoy an export turnover growth of 20 to 30% by the end of 2014. Statistics from the Vietnam Fruit and Vegetable Association have shown that last year, Vietnam raked in around $1.04 billion from shipping such products overseas, a year-on-year increase of 25%. China was Vietnam's biggest importer, accounting for 27.6% of the local market share. It was followed by Japan with 5.6% and the US with 4.7%. Vietnam's fruit and vegetables are now present in 40 markets around the world. The export has risen steadily over the past few years, ranging from $628 million in 2011 to $829 million in 2012, before surpassing the billion-dollar mark in 2013.
According to the Vietnam Association of Seafood Exporters and Producers of ASEP, Vietnam raked in $124.8 million from traffic exports to members of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations in 2013, representing a year-on-year increase of 13%. Singapore tops the list of Vietnamese traffic importers with $36.7 million during the period, up 2.4% against 2012. It was followed by Thailand with $34.2 million, a yearly increase of 63.3%. Vietnam is home to 236 traffic exporters with 94 oil processing factories that account for 90% of the total traffic export volume. In total, the fish have been exported to 149 countries worldwide.
After 7 months of disbursement, the organizational and individual accessibility of the 30 trillion dong realty package has been very low. In a bid to encourage banks to lend out, the Ministry of Construction issued Circular 18 and Resolution 188 to loosen lending conditions, aiming at warming up the realty market. However, the actual disbursement does not come up to expectations, as the majority of funds is being kept in banks. By January the 31st, Commercial Bank had disbursed more than 1 trillion dong, or slightly more than 3%, from the 30 trillion dong housing support package to more than 2,200 customers. The amount is too small to warm up the realty market. A lot of people say in the current tough and stagnant period of realty market, the lending rate of 5% for the package cannot appeal firms, and the complicated administrative procedures are also a big deterrent.
Hiện nay cái điều kiện cho vay đối với các doanh nghiệp trong gói 30.000 tỷ đồng nhìn chung là khắt khe về điều kiện, và cái hai nữa thủ tục xem xét thẩm định hồ sơ cũng tương đối là phức tạp. Đấy. Và cái thứ ba nữa là thực sự là với những cái điều kiện về lãi suất như hiện tại, trong cái bối cảnh mặt bằng lãi suất nó cũng đang có những cái mặt bằng lãi suất chung ấy, lãi suất tín dụng nó đang có cái xu hướng là được giảm rất mạnh như thế, thì cái ưu đãi về lãi suất từ cái gói tín dụng 30.000 tỷ này nó không thực sự còn hấp dẫn lắm.
Apart from the procedures and interest rate problems, house seekers have difficulties in making bank loans due to the lack of clear-cut regulatory instructions, which make bank baffled in disbursement.
Nhưng mà bây giờ là cái giải ngân, cái nguồn vốn đó như thế nào thì bây giờ hiện nay chúng ta rất lung túng. Rất nhiều người có thu nhập thấp, người ta muốn mua nhà ở nhưng người ta không tiếp cận được cái nguồn vốn vay đó. Thế thì cái lỗi này của chúng ta ở đây là một trong những nguyên nhân. Cái lỗi của chúng ta là cơ chế chính sách, các quy định cụ thể hóa, để nó cụ thể hóa hiện thực cái chương trình của chính phủ thì là chúng ta không có. Nói không có thì nó hơi cực đoan, nhưng mà dường như là chúng ta nó cái cơ chế nó không đồng bộ. Thực thi nó như thế nào? Thì đấy là cái câu chuyện là trong luật của chúng ta hiện nay là nó còn có thiếu.
In fact, a big bottleneck in the 30 trillion dong package disbursement is the collaterals. Although Circular 188 stipulates that investor of the projects can use the projects as collaterals to help break the ice of the market, regulatory risks coming from the defective regulations make relevant sides, especially banks, very prudent in lending out. Banks are tightening lending out to house buyers as they're worried about bad debt.
Như bọn tôi chẳng hạn, 2 gói mà tôi giải ngân là tôi dùng tài sản khác giao dịch đảm bảo cho dự án đó, chứ không thể như Bộ Xây dựng đang đưa ra là anh dùng chính dự án đó anh đăng ký thế chấp. Thứ nhất là luật nhà ở anh bị sai, anh không đăng ký giao dịch đảm bảo được, mà không giao dịch đảm bảo được rõ ràng là vướng cho ngân hàng.
Hàng quan tâm đến vấn đề tính an toàn. Tính an toàn trong cái việc thu hồi vốn cho vay. Mà tính an toàn đấy thì nó liên quan đến các cái biện pháp đảm bảo bằng tài sản và các cái cơ chế để xử lý tài sản đảm bảo. Đấy. Hiện nay thì đối với doanh nghiệp mà khi vay vốn thì thường là thế chấp bằng dự án và các tài sản khác. Mà các cái tài sản khác của các cái doanh nghiệp thì hiện nay hầu như là đã vướng vào ngân hàng, vướng vào gói nợ xấu hết rồi. Bản thân các cái dự án nhà ở xã hội thì chỉ thế chấp cái phần là tài sản hình thành trong tương lai. Mà tài sản hình thành trong tương lai thì đối với nhà xã hội thì lại bị ràng buộc cái điều kiện về vấn đề chuyển nhượng. Đó. Thì đấy chính là cái khó, cái chói đối với doanh nghiệp.
The construction ministry efforts to improve the realty market are visible. However, the disbursement of the 30 trillion dong package cannot come up to expectations if problems mentioned above are not resolved. As usual, the final part is the summary of the local securities market during the week. And that's all for now. Thank you for your attention. For comments and feedbacks, you can reach us by email at intovietnam@vitv.vn or give us a call at 0422208288. You can also follow us on our website at www.vitv.vn. Goodbye for now.